Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Killer Book Club. Killer Book Club is a Spanish teen slasher movie that tells the story of Angela, a writing student who attends university with a group of friends who all convene in a book club to discuss literature they read during and in between classes. One night after a traumatizing event, the group exact revenge on a professor, only for him to end up being killed. Things get worse when they try to cover up their secret, and a killer clown inspired by the stories they read starts killing off the group one by one. Angela and her remaining friends must race to figure out who the killer is and stop them before anyone else dies a gruesome death. I know slashers aren't the most critically acclaimed of movies, but they can still be entertaining in their own way, and this movie is anything but entertaining. It's a genuinely terrible horror flick bogged down by annoying characters, a boring story ridden with plot holes, and some of the most smug and self-important writing I've seen in a long time. Angela disappointed me right from the beginning, because she's yet another bland writer who lacks confidence in herself and doesn't have any background information beyond this. She is technically one of the more sympathetic characters, but that's only because she's more boring as opposed to everyone else being annoying. Her persona as a writer is essentially the same as Raquel's was in Through My Window, not just because both movies are Spanish, but because both characters have hang-ups with their supposed talents. Angela's writing is a bit more nuanced, but it's still barely explored and has pretty much no effect on the narrative as a whole. This is the least of this movie's problems, however, as every other character in this movie is a walking talking Gen Z stereotype with no agency of their own accord. Some are more notable than others, but what it comes down to is that all the characters in this movie just flat out suck. They never feel like a true group of friends who have each other's backs. They all have spoiled attitudes and constantly argue with each other throughout most of the movie. It is common in slasher flicks for friend groups to have a few bad apples to add variety to the movie, but here most of them feel like the same lame character. The only way they can be told apart is by vague traits that are assigned to them by the killer, and even then they still don't make any sense. Angela's boyfriend is called an emo simply for having blonde hair, while another is called a brat even though she never acts bratty at any point. If it weren't for all of them being introduced by name in the opening credits, I wouldn't know or care who was who. And speaking of the killer, the mystery behind their identity isn't the least bit satisfying. The suspense behind the killings is ruined because of the fact that they're announced pretty much as soon as they happen, and none of the clues are ever laid out in such a way that the characters are ever efficiently piecing things together. The movie is like this for most of the first half, and it gets worse in the second half when characters start getting killed off screen. Even in the worst slasher flicks of the 80s and 90s, at least they had the sense to show the characters all getting killed, and in different ways. Here, however, it just feels pointless. The characters were never that likable to begin with, but the fact that more than one character is killed off screen is ridiculous. It essentially means that the filmmakers couldn't be bothered to film a proper death for their characters, and it just reeks of laziness. I will admit that there is one thing it does get somewhat right, in the form of the kills themselves. They hit just the right level of disturbing violence, but not to the point of being over the top. And there is a nice sense of satisfaction one gets from seeing these spoiled brats get their just desserts. However, this isn't much of anything to celebrate, as having violent kills is the lowest bar a slasher flick can possibly set. And after a while, they start to lose their novelty as everyone dies in the same way. Killer runs after the victim eventually gets caught, they die. No stalking, no suspense, end of story. When it feels like the movie is going somewhere interesting, it gets distracted by subplots that are just plain stupid. Everything from the whole love triangle between Angela, her boyfriend Nando, and the nerd Sabas, to the snitch persona attached to Virginia despite the fact she continues to be a part of the friend group, is all just a bunch of useless filler that goes nowhere. And the whole time, the movie is just killing its horror atmosphere with this crap. The movie does try to salvage this a little bit with some cool lighting and by showing Angela having these weird mini psychotic breakdowns, but it all ends up being moot when the movie can't stay focused for even a moment. By far the worst thing about this movie, though, is the amount of plot holes it has. If there was ever such a way that Swiss cheese could be manufactured in a cinematic form, this movie would be the end result, because there are so many things about its story that make absolutely no sense. First of all, it feels like in every area where the killer and their victim are, there's not a single other human being in sight. It's like no one cares there's a killer clown on the loose, which hurts the immersion the story tries to convey. There's even one kill that happens in broad daylight, easily visible in front of tons of people, and everyone just keeps walking along like it's no big deal. Like, what? Second, I'm not sure what the purpose is with this movie showing everyone communicating in English via text while speaking Spanish in person. I know the characters are university students and have a more educated background, but there's no consistent reason given as to why they flip-flop between the two languages. Third, the killer must have a really strong cleaning solution, because aside from the clues they leave behind, there's virtually no trace of a murder having been committed when someone dies. Even other characters make excuses for people suddenly ending up missing despite knowing a killer is hunting them down. So the lack of urgency in the narrative only makes things even more baffling. Honestly, I wouldn't even care about so many plot holes being present if the movie wasn't so far up its own ass. The characters are written as if they're aware of the horror cliches and literary devices they're engaging with, and that it all plays a part in the story, when in fact it only adds further to the laziness. I'm not against movies being meta or self-referential in nature, but this one goes about it in pretty much the worst way possible. It tries so hard to be smart and clever with how everything plays out, but forgets to add any sort of originality. So the movie ends up with this consistently off-putting tone that makes it a pain to watch. Even the idea of a killer clown just makes me want to groan over how banal it is. I appreciate the movie tries to flesh out the killer with the writing aspect and how they plot out their killings, but as I said before, all it does is spoil the killings in advance and disrupts the pacing between the kills and investigation. The final act of this movie, where everything is revealed, is about as underwhelming as one could expect. There was a twist that I predicted right from the moment the characters gathered to scare the professor, and I ended up being 100% correct once the grand reveal was made. So when it was all said and done, I was just like, By the time it ends, it just doesn't have any momentum left to keep afloat with little story ahead, though it certainly doesn't help that it has so many plot holes sink in it. Bad slasher flicks can be fun in their own unique way, but this movie is neither fun nor unique. It's just bad, pure and simple. Overall, Killer Book Club is an awful slasher flick that completely fails to elevate itself from its rote conventions and poorly written story and characters. If you like having a good time watching truly terrible slasher movies, you might get a sick sense of enjoyment out of watching this, but honestly, it's just better to stay clear from it. There are so many other slashers out there that are more worth your time than this. The smug writing, unexplained plot holes, annoying characters, and general lack of tension amount to a disjointed mess that no horror fan should go out of their way to see. I'd rather go to an actual book club meeting dressed as a clown than ever see this movie again, because I at least know that idea sounds way more fun than anything involving this crap. What did you think about this movie? Did you hate it as much as I did, or did you find some redeeming factors to it? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review for Killer Book Club. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part where next time I review the Mexican comedy, The Great Seduction. Bye bye!